baby, welcome back to my second episode with Mark from Not Defining. Possibly this might be the split point. We'll see. Anyway, hi, Mark.
Hello,
Good to
Rob.
be with you again. So, okay, I want to ask you about so much stuff. We talked about coaching, we talked about content creation. You mentioned that you're ace and on the asexuality spectrum. How did you discover that? And tell us, people who don't know, a little about that spectrum and like where you think you fall on that spectrum and what that means and stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I came to my bisexuality quite late, kind of in my 30s, and I came to my asexuality even later, kind of in my mid-30s. It's very, very recent, and it's something I'm still exploring in myself. But basically, for the longest time, being bisexual, I kind of repressed a lot, and I was always confused about what genders I actually kind of liked and who I was and what. So there was a lot of anxiety and a lot going on with my bisexuality. I never quite felt that I could be like my true self. And even when I became kind of more open with myself and had relationships and things, I was always, I think, conscious that I was kind of like trying to be something to someone. I was trying to do what you're supposed to do, right? When it comes to dating and relationships and sex and everything. And it wasn't until I actually really started to accept and become confident in my bisexuality that I started to realize, if given the authentic choice, I don't know if I'm that bothered by sex and sexual attraction and dating and things at all, really. And that was really surprising to me. It was really, really surprising. But I learned a lot about the asexual spectrum. Like the bi spectrum is kind of attraction to different genders, and you may be on one side or the other. The asexual spectrum is kind of the presence of attraction or not. And so you might be one end of this spectrum, which is like a sex repulsed asexual, which is like even the idea, the thought of any kind of sexual act would just be really abhorrent. You just couldn't imagine doing it at all. But then you also get people all through the spectrum. You get people who are ace flux, who are kind of like fluid. You get people who are demisexual, who they can have sexual attraction, but they really need to have a close bond with the person first. But the one that I identify most strongly with is known as gray sexual or gray ace. And again, we get into all these labels, like we don't need to use the labels, but as we're talking,
you're
in
so
detail
defining,
about it,
Mark. You're so defining.
I'm so
can't
defining.
believe how
Somebody on my YouTube
how much
channel,
you're defining yourself.
I was talking about being grey ace, and someone on my YouTube channel like commented, was like, "It's ironic that for an account that calls itself Not Fine, you're certainly defining very specifically." And I was like, "Okay."
That's a good act out. I like that act out right there.
I don't know how they spoke, but this is how I imagined it in my mind. I don't respond to comments like that. But it's just like, the words are the words. I'm not going to define as gray sexual to the person on the street. But it helped me to understand that what I experience is actually a thing, and it's actually normal, and it's actually okay. Gray ace is basically, I have the full range of sexual feelings. I am sexually attracted to people. I know what that feels like. I enjoy sex. I've had the great joy of having lots of wonderful sex in my life. Like, I get it. All of it. It's fine. It's lovely. Sex is wonderful. Wonderful. I find people sexy. I find people of all genders sexy. But I don't experience it really that much. I
Mm.
don't really feel that it is something that is a huge part of my life. And I look at other people kind of at similar age to me. I look at most people that I see around me, and sex and sexual attractions is this massive thing. It's this wonderful thing. And it's like, you will seek it and it will be this huge part of your life. And I'm just like, hmm,
Mm-hmm.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think I've always been like that, but
Hmm.
it's been the kind of just the trying to be what I feel that I'm supposed to be, um, or the kind of the forbiddenness of like same gender attraction. You know, I wasn't out as queer for the longest time, and so I was like, oh, you know, it was this kind of forbidden thing that was very exciting. And then when I kind of was allowed to experience it freely, I was just like, okay, that was nice. So
Uh-huh.
that's really what, yeah,
Interesting.
my ace spectrum identity means to me.
That's interesting that the set like sex, same gender sex was almost like built up so
Oh
much
yeah,
because you were repressing it. But then when you actually explored it, you're like, okay, that's me and that's normal. But also I'm not like super interested in it. That's kind of interesting that it was
yeah.
like almost had more weight and maybe before you came out. And then once you're out as bi and comfortable with that, you realize, oh, like, well, actually the attractions and the sex are not that important. Like they're there, but they're not. I think that that's something that people, I mean, and for me too, like it's sort of a little counterintuitive. Like if bisexuality means the possibility of attractions to more than one gender, and asexuality means, well, if you think it means no attraction, then how do those combine? Like those seem to be mutually exclusive. But the gray ace thing, I think, is something that many people I've talked to have identified with, where it's like, it's not zero. Like you're not there, it's a spectrum, and maybe you're not like all the way in that bottom corner, but it's just not the same as the way, you know, people, other people seem to experience it. It's not as important. It's there, but it's not like guiding you fully the way it's guiding me fully. I just follow my penis around most days and see where it takes me.
Yeah, that's a
I'm somewhere
wonderful
else
place
on the
to be.
spectrum.
Yes,
But that
maybe
makes sense. Yeah.
maybe I'm a Kinsey one of the ace world.
I
It's
do think
funny,
actually
yeah,
we need a scale, an ace scale, right? Actually, with some kind of number, because like people think everything's a zero when you talk about ace, but
yeah,
it's a spectrum.
yeah.
You should invent a scale.
The Cusack scale, maybe. There probably
Yeah.
is one. But yeah,
Yeah,
people think
probably.
that bisexuals are like 50-50 and they get out of bed every morning and just like go and have sex with everyone. Um,
Yeah.
or asexual people are like complete zero and don't even know. And it's just like, no, we're
Yeah.
all a mishmash, you know, in
Right.
between. So I like to say that I could be attracted to anybody because I'm bi, but I'm not really attracted kind of to anyone because I'm ace. So that could be confusing, and I understand that when I
I
say
love
it.
it. I love the counterintuitiveness. So given that where you are on the A spectrum, like you mentioned when we were talking before this, like that you're single and poly and you're exploring that. Like, so given where you are in the spectrum, what kinds of relationships are you exploring these days? However much you want to get into it.
Mm. Yeah, well, in a way, I'm kind of actively enjoying not exploring relationships, which is
Oh,
really
cool.
a nice thing, but it's something that people don't understand. You know, like that. Oh, you have to be trying to meet someone, and it's this assumption, and that's something that I've kind of had in my conditioning my whole life. It's like, oh, you know, you will eventually meet someone, and it'll be there. And I'm really deconstructing that um, because I think part of accepting myself as bi and as ace and non-binary or just not defining. It's that authenticity we spoke about before. I'm challenging myself to ask the question, if there were no limitations, if there were no expectations and rules in society, if I stopped listening to what everybody tells me I should be or what the convention is, what would I actually want in my life? And it's such a wonderful, freeing question to start each day with. What does my body want? What does my brain want? Like, what feels good to me? And so I just go with that. And actually the answer for me at the moment is to not have a significant other, to spend time with my family, who I adore and who are my rocks. I love spending time with my family. I'm an uncle, I'm a godparent, and I just love, that's so important. And then I have amazing friends. I have very intimate friendships, it was like queer, platonic, loving, caring friendships. I love, 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 love that. And then I guess it's just a case of, I think, just seeing what every relationship comes, not saying like, this is a friendship or this is a romantic relationship or this is going to be intimate or physically intimate or sexual or sensual. Just seeing, just being really open and seeing what comes. I really fancy, that's a British term, so people don't get, but I really love couples. I find that I fancy couples all the time, and it drives me crazy. And in a way, it suits my bisexuality because, maybe you have like two different people of two different genders. I find that overwhelmingly wonderful, but also it suits my asexuality as well, because they already have each other. They've got their thing. I don't want to kind of be that to a person, but I would love to have connections which are fun and intimate and, all the rest of it. So couples are cool. Couples are cool. Yeah, I like that.
I love that for you.
Thank you.
It's actually funny you mentioned that, because I was scrolling through your YouTube. I mean, I've watched a lot of it in the past, but I was scrolling through it last night just to kind of see what was interesting to talk about today. And the one video that I clicked on and watched, that was like the first thing that caught my eye, was like why I like dating couples or something like that. It was about what you just talked about. That's so funny. And
Yeah.
have you has that been working out? Have you found some of that?
So I have not had what you would call like a relationship with a couple, mainly because I'm just super anxious and shy and polite in my daily life. And, I talk it up on YouTube and on the social media, everything, but in real life, it's so funny. People connect with me online and things, and as a coach and everything, and I'm in my bubble of what I love and what I feel really just able. Me in the outside world, people who know me in real life, they're like, "Oh my god, you are so horrendous." I have one one person who I WhatsApp and I just completely chaotic. I don't get back to people. I can hardly
That's
and
funny.
I being autistic as well and neurodivergent as well kind of is part of the reason. But so I haven't managed to actually have something, but I have had a few, let's say, interesting experiences, some fun experiences with couples of
Cool.
different kinds of genders,
Cool.
and it's honestly just amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I've had kind of two guys who've been a couple, and I think that's really nice. the but if it's like a kind of different gender couple, if it's like a male female presented couple, I never thought of it. I never thought of it until like maybe a year or so ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, can you imagine if like a guy and a girl were both like flirting with you? It is
Mhm.
mind blowing. It is
Yeah.
bi panic on a huge level. And I just think it's so
Yes.
amazing because I can be both things and I can have that
Yeah.
almost like gender fluidity all at the same time. It's completely overwhelming. So that I would say is my favorite. I do fall unrequitedly in love with lesbians, with a lot. That happens. They don't tend to want to be in a throuple with me, but if there are any, out there, you know, call me. I love you.
Amazing. Put it out there. Put it out there. And you're manifesting with the couples. Even if it's only a new thing for you, you're putting it out there, and I love that for you.
Yeah,
That you're manifesting it.
yeah.
I agree. Like, I've been with some couples, and I really like seeing their connection with each
Oh my
other.
gosh, yeah,
Like, that's kind of hot to watch, and
yeah,
I also like that that I'm not part of it, that I don't have like the pressure in that
yeah,
moment to
yes,
be in a serious couple relationship and please them all. Like, there's pressure that comes with that, but I
yeah,
like witnessing it, and then I like being the new thing that they're both reacting to, or
yeah,
like, it's
yeah.
kind of a fun dynamic, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely, absolutely. It's just
Yeah.
there's nothing quite like it. I would recommend if you're anywhere on the bi spectrum, if you're able to, it's just fun, even
Call
to go
Mark,
for.
have a threesome, call Mark. Is that what you're saying? If you're on the bi spectrum, call me. I assume, yeah.
even going for a coffee like with a couple on like a kind of date type thing is just like enough for me. It's so great. It's so great. So yeah, I'll
Nothing hotter than a coffee
yeah.
date. So you mentioned this. This is actually, I'm so curious about this topic, and okay, let me just ask. So you mentioned you were recently diagnosed with autism, and like there's a lot of crossover of neurodivergence with fluid sexuality, which like part of me kind of gets why that is, and also I can't fully explain why that is. And then you also kind of mentioned that your gender fluidity might be related to that in some way too. So tell me about all that.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. um I had always for the longest time um felt like I had a different brain to most other people from the youngest age. Um, I always had different things like different materials and sensations would really bother me. I could have kind of like meltdowns and kind of things like that. Um, I also had kind of like twitches and compulsions and things. Um, and I also had this hyper focused brain. So I would get very, very focused on one thing and I would have like very heightened senses and heightened emotions. Um, and I would always look at things in a different way. But like many people who don't have high support needs, so it's not immediately obvious, what it is. And so I just kind of felt like I was a bit like weird or different and stuff. And so I kind of went through life like that. But when I started coming into my teens, I started developing like real mental health issues, like serious anxiety, serious depression, serious obsessive um, anxiety, and all sorts of things. And it just felt like life was so difficult and I was exhausted. And I couldn't understand why I was so exhausted every single day, even if I'd slept well, even if, I wasn't tiring myself out. It's just like, oh my gosh. And I went through that for so many years. And of course, being a queer person was a big part of that. And I always attributed it to that, because that was very difficult. But then I kind of sought therapy and I saw psychiatrists and so on. And I was diagnosed with various things, and different people said different things, which was all fine. But it wasn't until actually, it was about 2 years ago, I started going to a psychiatrist, National Health Service psychiatrist for PTSD, because I'd been through an experience which was giving me like really severe PTSD. And so we saw each other for like every month for over a year. And we had big, long kind of assessments and talking. And right kind of towards the end, she said, have you ever considered that you might be on the autism spectrum? And I was like, what? No way. I had known so many autistic people, because being bi in the bi community, like it's quite common. There's a known crossover there. And I was like, no, I'm not autistic. Like, okay, like all my friends are autistic. Like, okay, yes, I do this and yes, I do that. But I had a stereotype in my mind. But she basically explained that autism can take a lot of different forms. And we went, she said that having assessed me, for a very long time, she's seeing. And so I did, tests and everything and got that assessment. And so I have a variety, which is kind of high masking autism, which some people call high functioning, but should be called high masking because you're not actually functioning well. And it means I have a great ability to be able to kind of look normal, for want of a better word. But that looking normal has a huge impact on me, and it makes me exhausted. And there are so many things that I force myself to do that actually I really, really just can't. And so having this diagnosis was really, really healing for me, because it explained so much of what I had been through but not understood my whole life. And
Yeah.
I think that, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I think that the crossover with the gender diverse, bi, asexual spectrums with autism is that I think with autism, it's a spectrum, and I think a lot of it is about kind of not necessarily understanding the given cues that society takes for granted. And so, yeah, a lot of autistic people will have difficulty with understanding like subtle conversational cues. I don't have that, but or maybe I do. You tell me, but that's kind of a common thing. I think from what I experienced, it's a similar thing with gender and sexuality. It's like I have never understood what this whole convention of sexuality and gender is. Like, I'm supposed to be a man, I'm supposed to be masculine. I have no clue what that's supposed to be. I don't understand it. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be exclusively attracted to women. I don't get why we're different. I don't get what that's, I don't understand how it's meant to be. And so that's how I feel about it. I don't know whether that is what it is, but
it's almost like, does neurodivergence kind of expose things in the world that kind of feel natural and kind of make intuitive sense as a human being versus things that are culturally created or human constructed that we grow up with and they exist in our society, but but it's like, wait, why? I don't get that intuitively. Is that because that's how I don't have not been diagnosed neurodiverse, and maybe that's why some of this stuff I didn't realize it till later. But at a certain point, I was kind of like, oh, this stuff I I I know that I've been taught it, but it doesn't actually make sense in my body. It doesn't feel right for some reason. Does that kind of resonate?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of us, like, bi people, for example, go through. Um, and that's how I experience that's how I experience autism as well. It's
Uh-huh.
just with a broader range of things. So
Right.
yeah,
Interesting. Cool. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's really fascinating. I definitely think there's like overlap there. And also in the poly community too, like sexuality, gender, and like relationship structure. I go to this poly discussion group. I actually haven't been in a while. I have to go back. But I remember one time a few months ago, the topic of the discussion that night was neurodivergence. And among this group of 30 poly people at the discussion that night, at least half had diagnosed neurodivergence of some
hmm,
sort. And then, and I don't, but as they're talking, I'm like, oh, I identify with that. Oh, I think that way. Oh, like, yeah, that makes sense. And as we're talking, even the half that don't have diagnosed neurodivergence are like, yeah, that describes
yeah,
me, or this piece of it. Maybe it's not as extreme, but I get what you're talking about. So there's like just so much overlap I realized in that discussion of neurodivergence and polyamory, just like
yeah,
thinking about relationships differently, not conforming to the way marriage exists in our culture and the way the love story, we're taught. And it just made so much sense to me the way people talk about polyamory in a more natural way that I feel in my body. And there's some kind of crossover with neurodivergence there.
yeah, yeah. And anyone who's been in kind of those queer spaces will know that, we have such a crossover. And I think to a certain extent, when you fit the norm in society, whether that's your sexuality, your gender, or your neurotypical status, or whatever it is, or your ability, or whatever it might be, um, you you have the opportunity to fit into the existing structures because they work for you, so you fit into them. So it's okay. Those of us who have been kind of forced out of that, either because we're queer or because we are neurodivergent or because we're disabled or maybe even other traits that might kind of reject us from the norm. I think people like people like that are more likely to be able to see that broader spectrum of things. So they may be more able to see different polyamorous kind of options, or to be able to think about love and relationships and sex, whatever it might be, in
Yeah.
a broader way, because we've kind of been forced to do that. And I think that's kind of beautiful in a way.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. All right, we got two things left on the agenda. Uh, one of them, if you're up for it, is a new segment on Two Bi Guys that we're calling Bye Bye Bye, or something like that. I don't know. I think that's what we're calling it now. This is where we each take a minute to rant on something we would like to say goodbye to in the culture, something that maybe is annoying us, or that we don't like. Do you have anything in mind that you would like to say goodbye to?
I definitely have something in mind that I would like to say goodbye to. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Then let's do it. I'm going to set a timer And Mark Cusack, what are you saying bye, bye, bye to? Your time starts now. You have 1 minute.
I want to say bye, bye, bye to people who say that bisexuality is complicated. You know, there's people like who are like,
Mm.
oh, I don't understand it, and like, can you explain it? Like, you know, what is it all about? Like, it's too. No, 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 no. Bisexuality, people, is so simple. Okay, I'm gonna explain really, really quickly
Yes.
bisexuality to you. Okay, right, here we go.
Okay.
You
30
ready?
seconds.
Right. Sometimes people love people. The end. Like, how is that
Woo.
difficult to understand? Heteronormativity is so difficult to understand. There's so many rules, expectations. We're all supposed to know. There's so many conventions. Like, it's so
Yeah.
complicated. So don't come at me telling me that my bisexuality
10
is
seconds.
complicated, because heterosexuality is so complicated. Leave us alone.
And that's your minute. Wow. Amazing. I love
That
it.
felt good. That felt good. Thank you for
That
that.
was a wonderful bye, bye, bye. That's so true. That's so true. Heterosexuality is so complicated. Bisexuality is like, okay, there's no rules.
There's
Basically,
nothing.
do what you want, and as long as it's all consensual and respectful,
It's
which is a
just,
good
yeah.
rule always. But heterosexuality is the complicated bit.
It's so complicated. I've been trying to understand it my whole life and I still can't. Like,
I love it. I agree. And what did you say? Sometimes people love other people. Is that the definition that you used? I love
this
that.
is the thing, like, because I think a lot of the time, you know, we say, oh, we can't teach children about, you know, different identities and stuff because it'll confuse them. It'll confuse them. And I'm just like, no, oh my gosh. Like, like how confusing do you make it for children when you like have different haircuts for like boys and girls, and like you have different names and pronouns and like all these expectations, like girls are allowed to do this, boys are allowed to do this, and you have to like this person or that person. If you don't like it, that's so confusing and traumatizing for children. How confusing is it to say to a child, sometimes a person might love another person?
Right. Someday when the world is all just fluid and open and not defining at all, people will teach about what heterosexuality and homosexuality used to be, and kids will be confused. Like, what? You
They
could
will be
only like a
confused.
certain, and they'll be like, what is gender? There used to be only two genders. What? Oh my god!
Yeah. And this is the thing,
And you could
like,
only choose one of them. What?
and this is the thing, if you actually look at the animal kingdom and the natural world, like most animals are bi. So it's like the default in nature. And so, like, it's this huge lie that we've created called heteronormativity. And actually, it's
Yeah.
so simple. It just, we're not adding something new with teaching about bisexuality. We're just saying, take away the complicated thing that you're teaching people and
Right. Right.
just be
Let it be open.
whatever.
Right. Right. Actually, yeah. Well, that leads to something I want to ask you, but it's also related to my bye bye bye. So maybe we'll talk about it after I do my little
I
rant.
can't wait.
All right. And I have not really planned this. I kind of know what the topic is, but we'll see where this goes. I
Okay,
have
I'll
no
time
idea.
you.
You'll talk. Okay. All right.
Okay,
Here we go.
ready? Three, two, one.
Yes. I would like to say bye 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 to the label wars. I've been in the label wars for a while, especially bisexuality versus pansexuality, but all the other
Oh,
ones,
girl.
I would like to say bye to the label wars, and I'm guilty of it too. But do whatever you want. Let's not police other people's labels. Let's not define all these things. The whole point of queerness and bisexuality and fluidity is that it's changeable and that it means different things to different people. How about we all just talk from our own experience? We share what labels we like and why, and we don't police other people's labels, and we keep an open mind about what that label means to them. And then we ask them
10
questions about them
seconds.
and their lives. And we don't go with this one word and take it to mean everything. Also, I'm guilty of uh,
Three,
of policing
two,
this and telling people
one.
they all mean the same thing. I'm gonna not do that anymore. I'm done policing. I'm done with the label wars. Bye bye bye. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, the hair dryer went off during that. I apologize. It distracted me, but But I even wrote stuff in my book about like pan and bi are, similar, and let's not fight with each other. And I agree with all the things I wrote, but I'm also would like to say goodbye to even being anti the label wars. This is the last time I'm going to be anti label wars. I'm done. I'm done with this topic. I'm taking your lead from not defining, and let's just like talk to people about who they are and not make assumptions based on a label they choose, right?
I have been so down for this rant, like for the longest time. It's just like anytime that someone asks, like starts that conversation, like pan or bi or blah, blah, I don't even care. Like if it's, I'm just like, I don't care.
That's the thing. I'm just bored by it now.
You're boring me. Yeah, yeah.
I like do think there was some we need to okay, there's these new words, we got to talk about it. People are fighting. We got to
The
we got to
children are
address it.
fighting. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm bored of it now. That's how I get that face you just made where it's like, "Oh god, I'm rolling my eyes like I don't care anymore."
We're over it, Rob. We're over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is what I wanted to ask you is like when I started the podcast, it was like bi, say bi. We got to say the word bi, like bi visibility, which is, which I support is a good thing. But what I see happening now, especially among younger people, is I'm not bi, I'm not pan, I'm nothing. I have no label. I'm not defining. That's the what I see more from young people. Maybe it's your influence. Do you see that? Is that like the way it's going where it's like I'm not even like I'm not straight either. I'm not bi, I'm not gay, I'm not straight. I have no label. Do you see
Yeah.
that, and why do you think that's happening?
100%. And much as I would love to claim that it was my influence, I'm certainly
Do it.
trying to
Claim it.
influence the youth
Claim it.
as much as possible. No, I think that that's just the way that it's going. I mean, I think you look at the kind of celebrities and pop stars and people who like the younger generation are looking up to, um, and a lot of them are just having this looser definition of
Yeah.
themselves, and I think in in our generation, kind of, I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, and I think that was like being gay was still like really a problem. We didn't have equal marriage in the UK, like all of this stuff. So it was really like that was a big thing to be gay.
Yeah.
And then that kind of became a bit more acceptable in some places. We had, and then it was kind of like, okay, the labels and things came out. And now I think what's wonderful is that there's not as much consequence to your label. It's not as much of a political act to say I'm this or I'm that. So people are more able to just be light with it and say, oh, well, I might be a bit of this, a bit of that. It doesn't matter to people as much. And that's so wonderful. So I think
Yeah.
our political civil rights and the although limited, but the progress that has made in some places has allowed for younger people to be less specific. So it's wonderful.
Yeah. I love it. Today my bye 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 is about the label wars, but maybe a future bye 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 will be bye bye to labels altogether. We'll see. But maybe that'll just be happening. It does seem to be the trend where it's like we need words to talk about the way things are shifting, but also the way we're going. I think the more open it is and less constrained by concepts and labels. That's sort of in an ironic way what bisexuality is to me. It's this expansion of possibilities, and that's just the kind of the word that means that to me. But it's really about like this sort of taking away of all the rules and regulations. Yeah,
Exactly.
last thing, I have been really excited to see on your social media recently you in drag. It's been so fun. You posted some performances you've done. I love your drag persona
I
and
don't
your
know what you're talking
outfits.
about. I don't know that guy. It's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah, tell us a little about your alter ego. What is your drag persona? And tell how'd you get into that and what do you like about it? Go.
Thank you so much. I am so delighted that you have connected with the world famous global superstar Marco Fabulasio. He
Oh,
is
right.
he is my alter ego, and he is everything that Mark is not able to be or hasn't been able to be in this
Hmm.
world. I've
Interesting.
always I've always performed. I've always been a singer. I was a singer in like a wedding band, a function band, and I've
Huh.
done lots of different things. So that if there's anything going on in terms of like singing or performance, like yo, I'll be there. I'll be doing it. It doesn't matter what it is. So different times in my life, I've always taken like opportunities to do that. But one thing that I was able to do uh, actually when I moved to Dublin like, a few years ago was actually to be fully out and kind of in queer spaces and things. And I had never talked, what we were talking about before, being kind of repressed and policed in the way that you express yourself. I had never been able to sing or perform in a way that was aligned with my queerness. I was always policing myself. I love to sing. Um, but I'd always been constrained by like what was appropriate, what was like
Hmm.
manly or masculine. Like I couldn't really ever live my like Britney Christina fantasy and like, shake around on stage. Like it just was never something that was available to me. And so I actually found this queer open mic night in Dublin, which was amazing. There was like comedians, singer-songwriters, poets, drag, like all kinds of different queer performances. It was really this safe and open space to just come and do anything. Shout out to Sam's Collective. They are wonderful. And I went and I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I thought to myself, okay, well, what can I do? Because I love to sing, but everything that I sing is just kind of like a normal song. Like it's not very queer. And then because I was doing Not Defining, I was like, oh my gosh, why don't I create performances that are like representing the underrepresented parts of the LGBT community or like educating about like different queer experiences or stuff like that. Um, and so I merged Not Defining into a ridiculous performance, and a little bit like you have done with your comedy. It was that lighter side of things, which I really really
Hmm.
loved. And so, in parallel to that, I'd also been marching in a lot of pride parades. I'd been doing the St. Patrick's Day parade in Dublin, which has a pride section to it. And I had been experimenting more and more with like different outfits, different clothes. I love making costumes. I always loved going to festivals, making crazy stuff, like just expressing myself in that way. And so bit by bit, I kept going back to this queer open mic. And bit by bit, I started to like wear more ridiculous stuff and do more ridiculous performances. To the point that I started like experimenting with makeup and then wigs, and then I did all this stuff. And so Marco Fabulasio was born. If you want to see my performances, I've got a little Instagram page, Marco Fabulasio. I would love for you to come and see the bonkersness of it. But it's basically in my mind, if I think of my most authentic expression, my most joyous, authentic expression, for a lot of people, for a lot of men, that image would be like a feminine image, like they might be a drag queen. And for a lot of people, that might be what they've always wanted to express. Um, for a lot of drag kings, it might be a woman who has always wanted to present as like a masculine. Or for me, it's never been that, but what it's been is just this kind of non-binary, non-defining kind of entity of like pure queer joy and stupidness. And so Marco
Uh-huh.
Fabulasio, he just represents that authentic joy that I have. He also comes out of quite a lot of darkness. As I said, I was suffering from PTSD and I'd been through some really traumatic experiences. And actually, he was my way of expressing joy. So he sings, he dances, he lip syncs, he wears a lot of pink, he wears a lot of like bright colors. And most
Yeah.
of my performances will just be a question of me dancing around and singing to some kind of Britney Spears song, um, trying to do stunts and tricks that I can't really do, but it's hilarious anyway, and kind of giving out like candy and marshmallows and sweets to like the audience, and kind of making some deep political point about some kind of LGBT identity at the same time.
Yeah.
So if that's something that
Cool.
you think is a fun time, then come and hit me up at Marco
Yeah.
Fabulasio. Come to a show.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We'll put that in the show notes so you can follow Not Defining as well as Marco Fabuloso. And I love that you use he him pronouns for your drag character, and which is like sort of, not what you expect from drag. It's traditionally this like gender play of playing with the other gender, but really drag can be anything. It can be in either direction, or what you're doing, which is you are fucking with gender and playing with gender, but
Oh,
not
I am.
necessarily going from one side of the spectrum to the other, which is also interesting given how you define or don't define your gender. And you use he
Exactly.
and they pronouns. So it's just like this heightened version of the unashamed queer colorful version of you, and it is whatever gender you kind of see in it, I guess. Is that how do you think about that?
That is exactly what it is, Rob. I think
Cool.
that when people talk about drag, it's really about bringing that part of you, which for whatever reason you haven't been able to express, and exaggerating it and celebrating
Right.
it.
Right.
That's really what drag is all about. And so, traditionally that might be, as I said, a kind of a binary, gender, or a male or female impersonation. That's beautiful. Um, that what I do when I think about my completely deep, authentic um, expression that I have never been able to show. Um, Marco Fabulasio comes out, like he just comes out,
Mm.
and I use he and they or pronouns, and people are like, oh, is it a drag queen or a drag king? And I'm like, I'm an anti-monarchist and I don't have a gender, so like, I don't really. So it's just it is
It's a
that
drag democratically
pure.
elected representative.
Exactly. So
Drag
it's just,
representative, yeah.
and that's the joy of it. What I love is to do a performance and for people to leave the venue thinking, what on earth did I just witness? Like,
Yes.
why
Yes.
was there like a 7 foot tall, like furry smurf gonk with like marshmallow hair
Yeah.
writhing around to the Pussycat Dolls, talking about like bisexuality and like spreading whipped cream all over himself? Like, why?
Oh,
Why was
hot.
that happening? And like, it very much wasn't hot. Oh, but actually, a very interesting thing is that I have discovered that uh, people people treat me very differently when I'm in drag, because I'm really
Mm.
not like a confident person in my body. Like, people are like, oh, but like, why you look great. Like, why shouldn't you? And I'm like, I'm not that person. Even like at the swimming pool, I'm just like, oh, I'm not body confident or anything. But I decided to get into like little pink hot pants and like, a leotard and just do it. And
I love it.
people people flirt with me so much. People are so like, they're just like, you look amazing, you look like so
Wow.
hot and stuff. But it's it's really interesting the different way that people find me attractive, and the different aspects of me that I never thought could be attractive, and yet they are, as Mark and Fabulous. So it's a really interesting experience all around.
That is awesome. Yeah, I love the outfit. I love the hair. Everyone should check it out. Maybe we'll make it the art album art for this episode. But yeah, actually, that resonates with me too, because I haven't done drag, but I've put on outfits to go to
Do
like
it.
gay queer parties, that outfits that I was too scared to wear for
Yes.
forever and would never have worn, and I don't totally feel confident enough to wear them. And then you get there and people comment on it and flirt with you, and you're like, oh, I can pull this off. Actually, what was I afraid of? And it almost gives you this confidence to step out of that comfort zone and do that. And I love what you said, like drag is whatever the gender play is, like it's about exaggeration and just like making it stupid. That's
So
my favorite
stupid.
part. Like I
So
love when drag is just like stupid, and I love on RuPaul when she just is hilarious, like cracking up because of how stupid something is. That's
so
like the
stupid.
most fun kind of
Yeah.
drag. So I love that you're embracing your stupid and performing and doing all this stuff. That's our time. We've gone way over. We've done 2 episodes worth, which is lovely. And I'm so glad to finally, after years of crossing paths and retweeting each other's stuff, or not tweeting, reposting each other's things, to finally get a chance to chat with you on the podcast. Thanks so much for being here, Mark.
Thank you, Rob, so much for inviting me, and so much for all the work you do. It is such an honor, and it's been so nice speaking with you.
Thank you. You're welcome. And I hope we can meet in person someday, and I can see how much taller you are than me in reality. I'm a little scared, but someday it'll happen.
I hope so too.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Two Bi Guys with Mark Cusack. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with my friends Vera and Leroy in the Netherlands, who have a bisexual podcast in Dutch, except for one episode that I was on in English. So you can check it out in advance. The podcast is called One Thing Does Not Exclude the Other. If you check out my website, robertbrookscohen.com, go to the book page and scroll down. It has all the podcasts I've appeared on talking about the book. You can listen to it there, and stay tuned to hear them on this podcast next week. Until then, happy October. Thanks for listening. See you soon. Two Bi Guys by One Bi Guy is produced and edited by me, Robert Brooks Cohen, and it was created by me and Alex Boyd. Our new logo art is by Caitlin Weinman. Our music is by Ross Mincer. To help support this podcast, visit patreon.com/Robert Brooks Cohen. You get early access, bonus content, and full video episodes. Visit robertbrookscohen.com to learn more about my coaching, my book, and my stand-up comedy. And thanks for listening to Two Bi Guys by One Bi Guy.